Into the Block. I'm Emily Proud. We've got Coach Carl Reed waiting here, and Brandon Marcello is in for Blake Brockermeyer today. We all love college football on this show. I'd even argue it borders on an obsession at times, so it's not like we needed one, but Saturday was yet another reminder of why we love this sport. The ball, four downs, and end zones are what make it football, but the players, fans, and tradition are what make it the greatest reality show there is. Am I getting a little sappy because the team I root for beat Alabama? Perhaps, but hey, while we're on the topic, let's bring in Carl. Let's bring in this three-shot here because, man, you have never looked better than you do right now. I hope the people can see it. Let's see Carl Reed. He's wearing this UT hat. I love it. Orange is your color, Carl. A little backstory here. You picked Tennessee to lose to LSU. I said if Tennessee were to beat them, I'd send you a hat. You'd have to wear it. But unfortunately, I think I clicked carrier pigeon instead of overnight, so it took a while. But you also picked Alabama to beat Tennessee, so it's perfect that you're wearing this hat today. I would love to hear from you. How good do you feel? Because you look great.
Well, I'm going to tell you what. The orange actually makes my skin pop out a little bit on the screen, but Tennessee is playing amazing football right now. And a friend of mine that remembers Josh Heupel from when he was the offensive coordinator at my home state school, the University of Missouri, said, "Reed, how dare you bet against Josh Heupel?" So, I've never picked against Alabama before, but man, I got the UT orange hat on today.
Well, now you get to wear it because we're about to talk a lot of Tennessee football here. And although I give you a hard time, you're hardly the only person to doubt this Volunteers team. A mere 5 years ago, Tennessee was a national punching bag when a coaching search led to riots on campus, an athletic director being fired mid-search. If all that wasn't bad enough, just last year, 2021, Tennessee fired Jeremy Pruitt for cause for committing 18 Level 1 NCAA violations. Oh, and had 25 scholarship players lost to the transfer portal. How in the world, Carl, did we go from that to now beating Alabama and the number 3 team in the nation?
Amazing culture, the right coach, and a great quarterback, and an offense that is firing on all cylinders right now. Josh Heupel is doing an all-time coaching job. If he holds on and beats Georgia and wins that division, National Coach of the Year candidate, he ended up being the right guy. Since Tennessee has moved on from Phil Fulmer, they have been in football Siberia. And now they've showed that their fans and their program are some of the greatest in the nation, and Josh Heupel has brought them back from the dead.
Brandon, what's done it for you? Coaching, quarterback, all those things are helpful, but how has Tennessee gone from the depths of college football to what you're looking at on the screen right now?
Yeah, everything Carl said is absolutely correct, but I think the general undercurrent here is great coaching. Josh Heupel's offense has been tremendous everywhere he's gone. Mizzou, UCF, and now Tennessee. He is an amazing coach, has an amazing offensive staff. I go back to this past January, in fact. I was at the coaches convention where everybody comes down, and there's certain little get-togethers where a coach goes up and presents items about their offense, their defense, and their philosophies. And by far, one of the biggest gatherings was when Tennessee staff went up to discuss their offense. Coaches love that offense. They want every little bit of morsel of information they can get about it. And this was a year ago almost now. And that just goes to show you how creative they are offensively, but also how great at coaching they are in game with adjustments and everything. And I'm sure we'll discuss this more, but the in-game adjustments they made to get Jalen Hyatt, their receiver, open, big reason why he had a record day with those 5 touchdown catches. Just amazing coaching job by this staff.
You mentioned the offense. We knew when Heupel was hired that the offense was going to take a step forward. Hooker even got some dark horse Heisman talk in the offseason. Cedric Tillman, who Tennessee's been without for 3.5 games, got a little bit of that first round love, but it takes more than just 2 players and Josh Heupel's offense to do what Tennessee is doing. So what did we miss or maybe overlook about this team that they're able to bring it all together in the 2022 season, Carl?
that he was able to find the right guys for the system that he wanted to run. He didn't win some of those recruiting battles against Alabama and Georgia, but he knows his offense and his system so well that he's able to plug in the guys that have the very specific skill set that he needs to have them successful. One thing that's overlooked about how great his offense also is how well he communicates, from the no huddle calls to the sight adjustments to all the in-game stuff that they do. He's proven to be one of the most elite guys in the country at that. He doesn't have a huge personality in the way that guys like Lane Kiffin has had, or guys when you think about Steve Spurrier, but he's proven offensively to be just as effective and just as dominant. And you got to give the man his due right now for the way that his team is playing and the way that his program is being run. He's at the top right now. And he has a fan base in a state that are fanatical about football. And if he can really keep this train on the tracks going, it's no telling how good they can be, not just this season, but in the years to come.
I love what they do week to week because they improve week to week, whether it's offensively or defensively in certain areas. And that's a sign of, one, great coaching, but also he has the room. Those players listen to them. They take what they're teaching them and they apply it on the field in practice and, of course, on game days. That is the mark of a great coach. You saw it last season, week to week to week to week, them improve. This year, the same is happening. And again, as Emily said, boy, I can't wait to watch what this team might look like when they get Cedric Tillman back out there on the field. And for that matter, there are so many things they can correct and get better at, especially defensively. That's my one big concern with them. Some of those numbers are starting to even out. Pass defense has been really bad for them, but their third down defense had been pretty good. Those two numbers are starting to shrink and kind of come together. But the difference here is that Tennessee can get some pass rush going. Rodney Garland, the defensive line coach there, by the way, a coach who knows how to beat Alabama, previously coaching at Auburn. This guy knows how to make life hell for SEC quarterbacks, and he was doing that even for Bryce Young. And by the way, Bryce Young, what a tremendous performance by him, creating something out of nothing many times. But again, Tennessee is figuring things out, how to attack quarterbacks, how to attack certain offenses. A credit to Alabama that they were even able to score as much as they were, considering how much pressure they were getting on Bryce Young. But again, I love seeing the week-to-week to progression here for the Tennessee Volunteers. And if that continues, why can't they be the national champions at the end of the year?
I like that you asked that question because I'm going to throw it right back at you. Tennessee now number 3 in the AP poll, but is there a case to be made that they should be the number 1 team in the nation?
I think they got the best resume. I mean, they do have the best resume. They've got 4 ranked wins right now, which is most of anybody right now. They've got the best win out of anybody in college football by beating number 3 Alabama, who some people thought were number 1 in some polls. They've got the best resume out there. They find ways to win. They gut out some wins. Of course, that overtime victory on the road at Pitt was fantastic as well. Doesn't get enough credit for what they had to do to cut out that victory. The Volunteers have the best resume on paper right now. But what makes people hesitant, one, is that defense. Secondly, I think there's still this idea of their offense being gimmicky, which it's anything but. It's consistent. It scores points every single week, no matter the opponent. And then also, I think we give a lot of credence, the benefit of the doubt, to the teams that have been there already and have been there in recent memory. Alabama, of course, Georgia, and then even Ohio State, which missed all of the playoff, but they got a lot of returning pieces. So we give them a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt. But as this season progresses, of course, Tennessee's going to have another shot here. If they beat Georgia, then I think there's no question they're the number 1 team. But there's no reason for anybody to ridicule anybody out there if they say, hey, I think Tennessee's number 1, because on paper, they've got the best resume.
Well, I'm not going to go so far yet as calling them number 1. I know Brandon is telling me this is the best resume, but this isn't a job interview. This is college football. And right now, you still have to consider the fact that Georgia and Clemson are going to bring elite defensive play to the table. And Tennessee doesn't necessarily have a championship caliber defense. They do have an offense that can score with anybody. But how do they respond when they get to playing Georgia, when they have to play a Clemson or an Ohio State in the playoffs, when you can't just run up and score every play because their defenses are very sound and elite at that level, it remains to be seen. But one thing's for certain and two things for sure. Tennessee controls its own destiny. You beat Georgia, and then you win the SEC championship game, and guess what? You in the college football playoffs. You are in the driver's seat for your goals and what you want to be.
Carl, let me ask you this. Who's the greatest college football coach right now?
Right now, I mean, to me, it's still Nick Saban. It's the guy that has multiple national championships at two different schools. I still think that he's the best coach in college football, and I've seen this scenario before. I would be careful about counting out Alabama. We've seen them lose games before, and they went out the rest of the season, and all of a sudden you playing them again in the SEC championship game, and they beat you. So I wouldn't count Nick out just yet.
Okay, that was my easy question, right?
Real quick on that on Saban with Alabama.
I thought that was an easy question.
These last 3 weeks for Alabama have been topsy-turvy because they lost Bryce Young in that Arkansas game a few weeks ago. And I want to see how this Alabama team rallies back together now that Bryce Young's healthy and he's the leader of this team. I think that goes far in not just with the offense, but also the defense and getting everybody back on the same track. They've been through hell the last 3 weeks, Alabama. Do some tough games, some tough moments without their quarterback out there in the field. Let's see how they respond from this. And I'm with Carl. I think they're very well a team that could and probably will end up being in the college football playoff at the end of the year.
Yeah, a lot of uncharacteristic penalties for this team as well. But guys, you see the graphic down below. It's a power tee. You see Carl's great hat. It's also Tennessee. So we're still talking about Tennessee. My point in asking that question, Carl, was that if Nick Saban is the greatest coach right now, how is it that he is unable to figure out this Tennessee offense, but you think that a guy like Kirby Smart, also, reigning national championship head coach, what makes you think that he's able to figure it out if Nick Saban can't?
Well, I think he has it figured out just fine. I think Kirby Smart will figure it out. I don't think it's gimmicky. I think that Kirby Smart has better players in the secondary than Nick Saban does right now. I think that there's been some misses in recruiting in the secondary, and Alabama is not loaded on the back end the way that they have been in the past. I don't think that it's a schematic issue. I think that it's a talent issue, and I don't think that we're giving Tennessee enough credit for how good some of their players are, guys like Jalen Hyatt, and that they have a guy like Hooker at quarterback. I think that it's a talent thing. So I don't think it's about scheme and outsmarting guys and figuring guys out. I still think at the biggest level, it's about players and stars playing like stars. And right now, Tennessee's guys are playing like stars.
Along those same lines, Brandon, we so appreciate you stepping in today, but we have to ask you about a tweet that you sent out yesterday. You said, quote, "Anyone else get notes of LSU's 2019 offense when watching Tennessee and Hendon Hooker this season? Okay, bye." So you casually just dropped that bomb and walked away for all of us to enjoy it. We would love for you to expand upon that a bit, because along those same lines of the Jimmies and Joes versus the coaching there, LSU had some stars, not just on Saturday, but on Sunday.
Now listen, my tweet, I mentioned notes, like it's like a fine wine.
Okay. Okay. Sense a little bit. Taste.
Quick whiff. I take some notes of, Forrest Floor and, Joe Burrow. No, I do think that they're comparable. I think what you're seeing is the next great offense in the SEC, and that goes from 2019 Joe Burrow and LSU to 2020 Alabama, which I think a lot of people, including even myself, might say that offense was better. In fact, it was statistically better in some areas than that LSU offense. And this Tennessee offense, as I said, they get better week to week under Josh Heupel, and they're still missing Cedric Tillman, a receiver. And what they're doing with Jalen Hyatt and the in-game adjustments to get guys open, the matchups, as you're seeing on the screen, just tremendous things. Guys wide open running in the field. This is an offense that can score against anybody. Anybody. I don't care what defense. And I am so amazed by the job that Hendon Hooker has done to play almost flawless football and running an offense that asks him to do so much and to throw the ball so often in a spot where it is potentially dangerous down the field. Again, is this LSU 2019? Maybe not, but I am getting some notes of 2019 LSU, and it is very possible they could be just as good as the Tigers by the end of this season. I love the coaching. I love the players, and I think they're just get going.
Carl, you're our football sommelier here. You sensing some notes, some whiffs of that 2019 Tigers team?
I can remember the music awards ceremony when the great Jay-Z said, "Men lie, women lie, and numbers don't." And I'm still upset with Jay-Z that he told you guys that numbers lie to us all the time. Tennessee is doing great on offense. Their numbers are ridiculous, but let's not jump off the cliff and compare them to that LSU team with the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, #1 pick in the draft, Jamar Chase. The guys that LSU had on that team were absolutely unbelievable. They left the field early in a lot of games because they were blowing people off. So, there was a lot of games where the night ended early. Tennessee is good, but let's pause the LSU 2019 comparisons. And I got a former player of mine and a former assistant coach that are LSU fanatics, and it kills me to say this, but we're not on par with Tennessee with LSU just yet. Not that team. Let's slow down a little bit on that.
Real quick, one more thing here, Brandon. In your defense, the fact that we're even having this conversation when you have players that Tennessee does versus the ones that LSU boasted on that 2019 team, a great example of just how unknown some of these players were. Jalen Hyatt gained 25,000 followers on Instagram. Not that that is a mark of your football acumen, but just the fact that nobody knew who this guy was. And then he single-handedly catches 5 touchdown passes en route to beating Alabama. What does it say about this Tennessee squad that they're able to do what they're doing with who they've got?
Well, I think Hyatt needs to change his name to Grand Hyatt because, man, he's bigger than the hotel chain right now. I mean, you're exactly right. And hey, listen, I can't wait to see what Tennessee's going to do in 2 or 3 years on offense when they get on the recruiting trail with all this cachet that's built up behind them. And, of course, the NIL program that they've got going on there. Recruiting is about to skyrocket in Knoxville. The banks of the Tennessee River are about to overflow with talent. So imagine what they could be accomplishing here in a couple of years. But yes, you're exactly right. Again, it goes back to my first point earlier in the show. The coaching is phenomenal. And this is a topic for another day, guys, but I wonder how much Oklahoma fans are sitting there going, "Ooh, I wish we would have hired Josh Heupel."
Yeah, probably a few Mizzou fans there too, Carl Reed, huh?
Well, a couple of things when you talk about recruiting and you talk about a kid like Jalen Hyatt, I think this is what made Josh Heupel successful. Jalen Hyatt played at Dutch Fork High School for a legendary coach in Tom Knotts, a 13-time state champion, and he's had tons of SEC players. So his evaluation, a guy like Josh Heupel is going to trust it, and it ends up getting him a big-time player in Jalen Hyatt. And Brandon, I think that you might need a percentage because you might just have given them an idea on an NIL deal with the Grand Hyatt Hotel. You might have just made the kids some money with that idea right there. But it's great in recruiting for Josh Heupel, Dutch Fork High School in South Carolina, one of the legendary high school programs in the nation, who's produced a ton of talent. And so I think that all those things matter. I talked with Jake Bresky, the director of recruiting at the University of Tennessee last week before the game, and the recruits that they were going to have on campus. And I have never heard him be so excited about the future of Tennessee recruiting as he was during our conversation last week with the real estate that they have in recruiting, the state of Tennessee, the state of Georgia, guys in South Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina is nearby. Big things in store for the University of Tennessee and their recruiting.
Guys, thank you so much. I wish I could just ignore what the producer's telling me in my ear right now, which is move on, enough Tennessee talk. We could do an entire show, but they are off to an impressive start this season. Let's move on to what we typically do on Mondays, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And hey, remember like 10 years ago, earlier in the show, when I said that this sport is the greatest? Well, Saturday in Salt Lake was college football at its finest. A reminder that some things are bigger than the sport. Brandon, the Utes win was good, but who the win was for, amazing. Take us there.
Yeah, it's just an amazing week that was going on there. I talked to Kyle Whittingham, the head coach there, and he was just telling me about how important that week was, one, for their Pac-12 hopes, but also just for the team, because you guys saw it on television. Every player wore hand-painted helmets to honor their fallen teammates, Ty Jordan and Adam Lowe. Just an emotional week going into preparing for that game. One, for their fallen teammates and knowing everything that they were playing for, but also in the Pac-12 race there. They already have one loss in the Pac-12 race. They needed to beat USC to stay alive in it in this new divisionless format. And boy, did they respond in the second half of that game. The offense clicking on all cylinders there in the second half. Cam Rising proving to be one of the top quarterbacks in the country, who gets overlooked way too often because he's just not necessarily consistent, but he comes up huge in big moments for them. And how about tight end Dalton Kincaid? Man, I haven't seen a Dalton rise to the occasion like this since Roadhouse. I'll tell you what, he is the Patrick Swayze of the West Coast, flipping that hair, catching passes, 16 targets. He caught every single one of them, 16 catches, more than 200 yards, and more than 100 yards, by the way, after the catch. Came up huge for them in the red zone. What a beautiful night in Salt Lake City, storming back to beat USC, to stay alive in the Pac-12 championship, and, of course, honor their fallen teammates. The fans stormed the field, and here's what's so great about college football. You see the Utah players and coaches emotional after the game, crying. Dalton Kincaid not really necessarily even being able to explain himself to reporters after the game about the emotion of it. And then, of course, you look at USC and Caleb Williams being emotional on the other sideline. This game mattered so much for so many reasons for both sidelines. What an amazing atmosphere. It just encapsulated what we love about college football. And if you could not enjoy that game, something's wrong with you.
Leave it to Brandon to come on the show and always go a tad step too far. The greatest Dalton since Roadhouse, Patrick Swayze.
That's what you got from that.
He always goes a step too far. What I want to know is, when you say hand-painted helmets, and that's a great thing to do. I was a high school football coach, and it took us hours just to put the helmet decals on for 50 kids. And so you're talking about a handmade paint. I want to know who did that and who took the time to do it. It's a great thing. Kyle Whittingham, one of the great coaches and great leaders in college football, doesn't get near as much credit, I feel like, in national conversations as he should. Before he took over at Utah, a longtime defensive coordinator up under Urban Meyer. He's one of the great college football coaches in the game, and it's not surprising that he could get a team dealing with so much emotion to focus in and play at the level that they did to beat USC. There's no surprise here for me for that with Kyle Whittingham coach team.
Well, here is the credit. Thank you guys for pointing that out. He has done a spectacular job at Utah. And here we go. That Pac-12 race is going to be interesting down the stretch. It just got a whole lot more interesting. Well, Carl, a 17-point comeback was the backdrop for the game that may have decided Big 12 supremacy. TCU came back from that deficit to beat Oklahoma State outright, winning it in overtime. The Horned Frogs remain undefeated and are now sitting at number 8 nationally. Carl, where does TCU fit in that national conversation?
Well, I think that right now, from a national standpoint, maybe the Big 12 isn't looked at the same, with Texas not being overpowering, Oklahoma being way down. But you got to put some respect on TCU's name and the job that Sonny Dykes is doing there. And they could make this college football thing very interesting. If Alabama ends up winning the SEC and beats a Tennessee or Georgia, do you put the loser of the SEC championship game in the playoffs, or do you go with TCU? I think this is going to make an interesting conversation. And with the way that they're playing and the way that Max Duggan has been playing at quarterback, you have got to give TCU a strong look at playing in the playoff if they win the Big 12 and finish the season undefeated. A good friend of mine, director of recruiting at TCU, Brian Carrington, told me all offseason, Don't be surprised when TCU wins the Big 12. I say, man, you crazy. I don't see it. But he saw it, and he's telling me, and he reminds me of it every time they have a big-time win. Sonny Dykes is doing a special job leading this TCU program right now, especially in the transition from Gary Patterson to him. And I think that you got to really look at TCU strongly if they finish the year undefeated.
Yeah, I had the privilege to watch them in person a couple of weeks ago against Kansas, and they can win a lot of ways offensively. They can run the ball, they can throw it. Max Duggan, what he's been able to do when he started this season as the backup and he's been thrust in there, he's a guy that maybe we should watch just as far as Heisman conversation because he's been so consistent in leading that offense and coming up in big moments right now. Quentin Johnson, the receiver, finally kind of living up to that first-round hype a couple of weeks ago with some big catches in the Kansas game. And, of course, you mentioned the comebacks. They had to come back on the road at Kansas against a very good Kansas offense. And then, of course, the 17-point comeback against Oklahoma State. You look at the rest of the schedule, everybody's like, well, they play Kansas State this week. And then after that, there's only one more ranked opponent. But I'm warning you, the Big 12 is the most competitive conference in all of college football this season. Anybody could legitimately beat anybody in that conference. So TCU has a lot of work to do, but I'm with Carl. If they go undefeated, they should get some consideration for the playoff, but I have my doubts that they get through it unblemished.
Whoa. Did you just say the Big 12 is the most competitive conference this year? Is that because the teams are a lot more equal and they may not have a dominant team the way that the SEC has or the way that the Big 10 has and Ohio State? But you just said the Big 12 is the most dominant conference in college football. Every time you come on here, man, you say something wild.
I didn't say they were dominant. I said they were the most competitive.
Most competitive.
I mean, listen, I'm a wiry, competitive guy. Doesn't mean I'm the best at what I do. I'm like mid, man, but I'm competitive.
You live in Fayetteville, Arkansas. You live in the heart of the SEC country, and you came on here and said the Big 12 was the most competitive conference. I got to check your clippers, man. I think when you shaving your head, man, you leaving a small piece of scalp on the floor, man. We got to talk about this. Every time this guy comes on here, Emily, it's something crazy comes out of his mouth. Woo!
I see where you're going. There's a lot of parity in the Big 12. You really can't debate that. Any team can lose on any given Saturday. So it's been spectacular to watch so far. But guys, we got to move on. There's so many things we have to get to. The college football playoff is definitely something that we will talk about numerous times this season. So let's move on to some of the bad from the weekend. The Pack adding injury to insult when they began the day, announcing that their starting quarterback and a guy widely seen as one of the nation's best at that position, Devin Leary, is out for the season. They then proceeded to prove just how much they're going to miss him by not finding the end zone once in a loss to Syracuse. So, Carl, what is this team without Leary?
They're very bad. And so when they were getting a lot of credit in the offseason of being a team that could win the ACC, being a team that could potentially be in the college football playoffs, and Devin Leary's a special player. Arguably, you could have said he was the best quarterback in that league coming in. But you can't let losing one player, even though it's the quarterback, make you look as abysmal as they've looked as a football team, not just an offense, but a defense too, without his absence. This is a huge loss for them, and it showed that they got a solid program, but they're not yet ready to be in the elite football program conversation. You should have a backup quarterback that at least has some type of competency running your offense, and they don't have that right now.
How frustrating has it been to be an NC State fan? I mean, last year, having a kind of a record year, setting the stage for this season. They couldn't play in their bowl game because UCLA pulled out late. They had a chance to kind of prove themselves going into the year. And then all of this happens with so much expectation. Even some people saying they were a dark horse for the playoff race before the year. And now you lose your quarterback, Devin Leary, after even not doing so well early in the season. Man, just absolute frustration. I feel for you, Wolfpack fans.
Yeah, it's tough right now. I will say it's different than losing to a typical Syracuse team that we've seen in the last 10 years. This is a very good Syracuse team, and I'm sure we'll talk about them some more as they get ready to play Clemson this weekend, later this week. Meanwhile, Penn State now 0-9 versus top 10 teams since 2017, and Saturday's beatdown at the hands of Michigan was just another example of how wide the gap is between Penn State and the Big Ten elite. We used to say the same thing, though, about the coach on the winning end of this game, Jim Harbaugh, but his team has closed the gap. Brandon, why in year 9 isn't James Franklin quite there yet?
I don't know, and I'm starting to wonder. The thing is here is that Michigan just absolutely dominated in the trenches, rushing for 418 yards. Penn State's defense was allowing less than 80 yards rushing a game. I can't believe what happened to them in Ann Arbor. And it kind of just shows you that there's always like a game or two like this for James Franklin every season. And it's just baffling to everybody. And I'm sure for the Penn State fans. And here's the other thing. James Franklin, you mentioned Jim Harbaugh and all the crud he was receiving. Now he's turned things around. But James Franklin's 3-6 against Michigan. I mean, that's not good. So what's going on here? Well, the recruiting has been fantastic here the last couple of years. Right now, they sit, in the top 10 in recruiting right now in the 24/7 Sports Composite. They've got the type of players coming in. They've got some playing right now, Nick Singleton included. So here in a couple of years, they need to get things going. And that's when you'll be able to, not say properly judge James Franklin, but that's when you're going to be able to kind of say, maybe we need to make a decision here about James Franklin, the future of this program in the next couple of years. But I think one thing they need to probably start is just to just say, hey, we got to make a change at quarterback. Let's do it. Let's make the change now. Let's see if we can be a little bit more dynamic offensively.
The most popular guy always in the room is the backup quarterback. Michigan is just better than Penn State. They are kicking butt in the trenches. They weren't ready to beat this Michigan team just yet. From a recruiting standpoint, Michigan is recruited at a really high level. At those positions, they have their own Heisman Trophy candidate guy at the running back position. And I think that Penn State is a good football program. They're just not better than Michigan and Ohio State at this point.
All right, let's get into some uglies. Notre Dame, Fighting Irish took a 16-14 loss at the hands of a Stanford team who was previously on an 11-game FBS losing streak. It's the second ugly loss to start Marcus Freeman's tenure, and both of those losses have come at home. Speaking of coaching, is Freeman in over his head, Carl?
No, I don't think that Freeman is in over his head. I think that when you lose Brian Kelly, a guy who has won the way that he has, and you lose some guys to the transfer portal, they have to recruit better. And I also don't think that he was given a chance to maybe go out and get the offensive coordinator that he wanted. He kind of inherited most of this group of guys. They are going to have to let him make some decisions on how he wants his staff to move forward. But until he has a staff in place that he himself hired and a full recruiting class with his guys, I don't think that you can say yet that he's in over his head. I do think that he's going to have to make some adjustments, though, on his coaching staff this offseason, and it's going to be some uncomfortable conversations had.
Yeah, Carl's absolutely right. Let him hire the staff he wants. Let him get the guys in there, especially offensively, and give him a couple of years to get everything in place. Recruiting is going gangbusters for them right now, and that's because of Marcus Freeman. The players love him there. The recruits love him. Let him get this thing going. Let him get the type of staff he needs in place to work his system. Right now, he does not have that. Notre Dame administrators need to kind of stand out of the way.
When coaches get these jobs, and when you have the emotional low that you had when Brian Kelly left because nobody saw that coming, and then you have the emotional high because Marcus Freeman got to take over and he was really popular, you have got to let these head coaches make their own decisions with their coaching staff when you give them these jobs. That's the only way that you can hold them accountable, in my opinion, and that you can judge them correctly. And he did have some guys on there that he didn't have a choice on whether or not he was going to have to keep.
Along those same lines as first-year head coaches, what you do on Saturdays, as we've seen many times, trickles down to other areas of your program, including recruiting. The Gators saw that firsthand when, after losing handily at home, top 24/7 wide receiver Creed Whittingham decommitted. The Gators' season started with a bang over that win over Utah, but things have come back down to earth just a little bit. So, Brandon, 7 games in, how do you evaluate the start of Billy Napier's Florida tenure?
Now, Billy Napier just does not have the type of players and personnel in there he needed. We knew going in that they were going to be kind of an issue there, and he needs a couple of years to build this thing back up with the talent there. You know, listen, it was Tom Petty night in the swamp. They're singing songs and going crazy. But that program right now this season is free falling, just like the Tom Petty song that they were singing in the stands. And it was 42-21 late in that game. It wasn't even close. LSU was dominating them. And Anthony Richardson, as much as I love him and believe that he has a very high ceiling to be a great quarterback in the SEC, he has more interceptions than touchdowns right now, and he ranks 90th nationally in passer rating. Right now, he's proving to just be a great running back playing quarterback. But I do believe he can be a great quarterback later down the road. They just got to get better players in there and better personnel around him. That's going to be a year or two away. I'm sorry, Florida fans. This is going to be some rough driving down the road here, but I hope you got to enjoy singing all those Tom Petty hits as you watched your team free fall.
Same thoughts on Billy Napier that I have on Marcus Freeman. It takes time. We talk about Brent Venables also at Oklahoma. Guys get these jobs, and because they've been good in the past, everybody wants immediate results, conference titles, national championships. It takes time to build a program, establish your culture, go about the way you're going to get recruiting. You got to let these guys get 3-4 years in before you can really determine whether or not these programs are going to be elite or just be middle of the road. Florida doesn't have the talent, especially at the receiver position. Like Brandon said, quarterback's more of a runner than he is a passer. And what we're starting to see is maybe Dan Mullen wasn't crazy when everybody was saying he needed to play Anthony Richardson and he didn't feel like he was the best guy for the offense. You know, you got to really consider how he felt now.
All right. So some of these first-year head coaches are maybe learning to fly, Brandon? You like that? Well, we're just gonna, I know that I won't back down. You know, they're not going to back down. That was the other one that was floating around in my brain. But I love a good pun, especially a petty pun. Doesn't get better than that. All right, to end our show, what?
That's our last dance.
Here we go. Carl's like, shut up, you guys. All right, time to give out some hardware. Well, not actually. We don't have any tangible things to provide to you. But a shout out from Carl Reed is just priceless. So, Carl, who is winning your Run the Rock Award this week?
During the middle of watching college football Saturday, my cousin from Detroit, Michigan, Rock Turner, he called me. He's a Michigan fanatic, and he says, do you see what Michigan is doing to Penn State? You better give my boys the Run the Rock this week. Blake Corum, offensive line at Michigan, you guys ran for 420 yards on Penn State. You ran them off the field. This offensive line makes me feel the way I felt as a kid when I used to watch Nate Newton and Larry Allen run for the Dallas Cowboys and block for the great Emmitt Smith. This is a Jim Harbaugh coached offense. Offensive line is playing great. Sharon Moore, the offensive line coach at Michigan, should be a head coaching candidate with the way that group is played. Offensive line is unbelievable. Running backs unbelievable. Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, Run the Rock, University of Michigan. You guys are playing downhill and running the football, and it is a major problem for defenses in the Big Ten.
Yeah, those guys are spectacular, but Carl, I got to ask you this. You saw the holes they were running through. Is this year's version of Michigan's offensive line even better than last year's Joe Moore Award winners?
It could be, and it's playing like it is. And I think that's a testament to the offensive line coach, Sharon Moore, the way he has recruited, the way he has developed, the way he has coached that group. You can arguably say right now that Sharon Moore at the University of Michigan is the best offensive line coach in the country, and he should be in high consideration for any head coaching position that comes open. Look at the way this group is playing, and look at the way that they're running the rock. Unbelievable what Coach Moore has done with the Michigan offensive line.
Just spectacular. And that, my friends, is Big Ten football. And that's our show. Thank you both so much for all of your great insight. Brandon, thanks so much for stepping in and riling up Carl Reed. It's always fun when he gets a little irritable on a Monday, but that's what we love to see. Great
Competitive,
conversation
not dominant.
There we go. Competitive. Like you two right now. Very competitive. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. Carl, you look amazing. We'll see you back here Wednesday for some picks.